Hello everyone and welcome to Freelo or Forfeit, this time featuring Tahm Kench in the top lane. Today we start a new series on the channel where I discuss current picks, whether meta or off meta, and do a deeper look into that champion and their builds. I'll be taking a look at their history, where it came from, why it's being played, or conversely, why it's not being played enough, and in the end, I'll give a judgment on whether you should play it or not. In today's first episode, we'll be taking a look at Tahm Kench Top Lane. Let me know in the comment section down below who you guys want to see next. I'd like to make one of these every single week or maybe twice per week, so let me know which champion meta or off meta that you'd like to see. This is a series run and controlled by you guys, the subscribers, so give me your champion and our build that we'll be talking about for episode number 2.
Savor the misery.
In-game, Tahm Kench is a tanky monstrosity with enough raw stats and utility to slip into either a solo lane or supporting role.
When Tahm Kench was introduced to League of Legends, it was understood right away that he could be played in the top lane. However, on his release, TK was one of the worst champions in the game in terms of win rate. He was absolutely abysmal. This meant that Riot would look to buff him, and they did, by a pretty sizable amount. It really only took these couple of buffs combined with the fact that it was a tank meta at the time to take him well over the edge.
Play where you outlast first and you forget to click the Morgana ulti. Oh, that's what I would do. And then he just looks right. Let's see what Steve can do.
Is hungry. Who's in trouble? Flash for flash. Steve is gonna nom him. Lines up the dark binding and first blood, 2 elements.
I love the skin choice.
When he comes out of this, no silence to follow, but I don't know if TSM can put themselves in a dangerous spot to help back Bjergsen here.
Nope.
And TSM is getting all chaotic. Abyssal Voyage coming through, but it's a short one. And TSM looks like to be able to make the distance necessary.
Tahm became a ridiculously overpowered champion during Season 6. He was very tanky, did a ton of damage, and was a huge lane bully, and even scaled decently well with great utility. He was one of the first discovered OP tanks during the Season 6 tank meta, which would eventually lead into Tank Echo and Tank Poppy, which we saw for the rest of the year. The idea of tanks being strong in the laning phase, being good lane bullies, as well as dealing really good damage is always a balanced nightmare for Riot. I would argue that this might be the most unhealthy mechanic in the game. When assassins do truckloads of damage, it's very frustrating. It's really annoying to be completely one-shot by a Talon. However, when you can hard CC them, at least you can kill them. While it's not perfect design, one thing that always makes people feel better is when you catch out the 10-0 Talon and get a shutdown on Jinx, it's like, yeah, in your face, kid. Even though they were equally as unbalanced, it feels especially unfair when someone you cannot kill with either 2 or 3 people can easily solo you down and kill you. He gets to deal damage while also building tank items. Back then, there was something slightly different in his kit. His ultimate had a passive that increased his damage, so he spiked pretty hard at level 6, as well as having even more damage in a lane bully's kit. They knew that he was a huge problem, so he received plenty of changes. This passive damage was shifted from his R onto his normal passive. His attack range was reduced, the width on his Q was shrunk, his damage was lowered, and his stacks of his passive were reduced back to 5 seconds, which was a revert of a previous buff. So, he was gutted out of top lane and became mostly a support. However, there was still a problem. Kench was still broken in competitive play as a support. He was just so valuable. A walking beefball that became a free QSS for your team goes a long way when you're supporting the best players in the whole world. He was repeatedly changed and nerfed in the support role, removing movement speed, nerfing healing on his gray health, gutting parts of his kit. He was still being utilized despite heavy nerf after nerf. His solo queue win rate in the support role was in the low 40s, and for a long time he had the lowest win rate for supports in the whole game. This seems to sound like a recurring theme, and something that continually happens with certain champions such as Akali, Ryze, and Kench. They have horrible solo queue win rates, yet are high priority in pro games. This meant that much like Akali and Ryze, Riot wanted to try to do something, and that something was patch 9.9. These changes are big. Firstly, for support Kench, he is now grounded while eating an ally champion, which prevents Kench from flashing while he has an ally in his belly. This is obviously a big hit to support Kench, which then freed up some of his ability to be buffed in other ways. First, he received an adjustment to his passive damage, which overall most would consider a buff, because it's just a slight nerf to the early game. He got a nice buff to his Q as well, allowing him to poke and harass even more. It was already on a low cooldown and had a good slow, which were both made even better. Finally, one of the biggest parts to these buffs that have gone almost completely without any discussion is the buff to his E, now costing 0 mana. This means that he can convert the gray health into his shield at no cost, which is a huge buff because of one specific interaction, which is with the rune called Shield Bash. His thick skin is only a 6-second cooldown, and now that it costs no mana, Kench can receive a free shield even if it's small as heck every 6 seconds for free, helping him proc the Shield Bash rune. Normally, you wouldn't spam this because you want to try to keep the gray health to heal. Now, it's a little bit more beneficial to convert even a tiny bit of your gray health into a little tiny shield just to proc the rune, even better for lane trading. According to u.gg, in a somewhat decent sample size of games, this rune page has a 60% win rate, which is one of the highest I've ever seen for a page that has almost 200 games. There is literally no way to 1v1 this champion with this setup, and don't underestimate approach velocity. There aren't that many champions that do well in League and can take this rune. I would say Ashe is the only other champion that gets to use this rune, but it's no joke on Kench either. You slow them with your Q and then run them down. This is massively OP, and he's unbeatable until level 11 with Grasp of the Undying. Heck, even Adrian said you can't run away from this guy.
Dude, that actually you actually can't get away from this champion.
As far as the Tahm Kench leaderboards, right now there are plenty of people spamming TK top lane with great results in higher elos. Good Guy Gary was playing a lot of Conqueror Tahm Kench since the patch, but recently he swapped back to Grasp of the Undying. I think both are good, but one thing about Grasp is that you also get to utilize the resolve tree, such as Second Wind and of course Shield Bash like we mentioned. With the buffs, across the board his win rate and play rate have gone up in the top lane, and I'd say right now he is the single strongest top laner in the game in terms of laning phase. He does get outscaled, and I've even seen several Kenches go legendary out of laning phase, but eventually a Riven will be more useful than him, and he does have a bad matchup into Gangplank, but overall he's just really annoying, and if you ban Gangplank, you can spam Tahm Kench. I doubt just yet he'll be nerfed, because outside of solo queue, he's not seeing tons of competitive play just yet. However, if he's able to be successful in pro games as a top laner, I would say you should use and abuse him while you can, because he's likely to be nerfed then. After giving it some thought, looking into Tahm Kench, researching him, and even playing him a couple of games myself, I would say that I dictate this champion as freelo, not forfeit. This champion has everything you need in the top lane, and truthfully speaking, he right now is the strongest laner in the game in top lane. It's just so hard to deal with him, and even people really don't know how gray health works. One thing about the gray health is it just seems kind of confusing for people, and that does really well in low elo. He's not necessarily hard to play, and he's very effective even utilizing him at the highest level, and there are people in Challenger that play him, which to me means he's freelo. Anyway, that's gonna do it for Tahm Kench top lane. As I said, abuse him while you can, and let me know what you thought of this video in the comment section down below, and let me know who you guys want to see next time on freelo or forfeit. Thanks for watching, and hit like and subscribe.